else fainted when they saw Byron. But
CPAC.
Yeah, right.
Do you see her hand motions over here?
What was it? It was fabulous.
Did you guys see this over here?
No, what was it? What was it?
Woo!
Everybody at the same time. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Woo! That's going to be our new CPAC, like, secret handshake, you know? Yeah, exactly. There we go. Okay, guys, gentlemen, it's wonderful to see you. You were with your wife doing the CPAC activism boot camp training. How fabulous was that?
It was just like this.
Yeah.
Activism training was fantastic. There's so many people right here in Dallas, Texas. The conservative movement is alive and well, passionate about everything from education to border security, making sure we get back on track. My wife is right over there, my wife Erica.
There's Erica.
There you go, wave over there.
Stand up, Erica.
Stand up, go ahead. Stand up and wave.
There she is.
That's her over there. But it was a great event, and I think the biggest thing is people, of course they're tired, but they want to do something about it. And I think that the conservative movement is prepared to do something about it, and not just in 2022, but in every year to come. The time has come for us to step up, take on this battle, take the country back, save America again.
Again.
We got to save it again. But we're going to do that work starting this November.
Congressman Roger Williams, first off, I'm a fan of both of you. We were just talking with Sarah and with one of your colleagues, Congressman Babin. We were talking about all the bad problems. I mean, it was dark. It was sad. We didn't even get through half the problems. It was like a list. But here you are. We're the happy warriors. We got to find solutions to these problems. So this is going to be a very tough task. But let's go and break this down. So Congressman Williams, I'll start with you. How do we solve these very complex problems where the Democrats, they can't even define what a woman is. They can't even define what recession is, and they think men can get pregnant. Break it down for me.
That scares me to death. But listen, you know, this is an important time. Every year we've always said, haven't we, that this is the most important election of our lifetime.
Yes,
haven't we said that so many times? I believe this is the most important election of our lifetime. And we've got to have answers. We don't want to just have rhetoric. We got to make sure we don't overpromise. I've said all along, we need to pick 3 or 4 things we can do and make it happen as we go into 2024. But this is serious stuff that we're involved in. Just all the things, Mercedes, that you said. Who would have thought we'd ever be negotiating this or even talking about it? But we're on the right track. We are the party of lower taxes, less government. We try to cut spending, defend borders. This is what we stand for. And we're going to have to start making people understand where what we stand for, and we have to be able to say it. I was in the airport the other day, and when I got off the airplane, people knew that I was on the airplane, about 15 of them, and they began to yell and scream at me with signs and try to follow me up the elevator. And in the past, Byron, I've kind of let it go, right? Because we're peaceful people. We got things to get done. But I had all I could take. And I dropped my briefcase. I remember thinking to myself, I hope somebody is taping this. Because this woman was yelling at me about this and that and her body and this and that. And I finally fired back at her. I didn't say anything bad, but I fired back at her with the truth, right? The truth's on our side. We're on the right side. And all of a sudden, she broke down and just started crying. And she said, I've never been talked to by a man like that in my life. Well, I was talking about America and the great things that we have. And her husband took her away. And I tell you that story only because in the past, we may not have been fighters. We have been thinkers. But the other side cannot take a punch. They showed me that the other day. They don't have truth on their side. They don't have facts on their side. All they do is lie. And we have to fire back at them, and we have to run through the finish line, and people need to know that the best government is the less government, and all the things we believe in conservative values. But we're on the right side. We have to sell it. We have to punch them back because they can't take a punch. And that's what I would say. That's our charge as we go into this next several months, is to remember who we are, what we are, and we got to make things like tax cuts permanent. That has to happen. We're coming out of the greatest economy we ever saw, and we saw it torn up in 18 months. I'm a small business owner. I employ hundreds of people right next door in Fort Worth, Texas. And I'm old enough, I remember 1981 and high inflation and high interest rates. But we've seen the greatest economy come down now to once very average. We have to build it back. We can, and I think we will. We got the greatest workforce there is in the world if we let them work, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
And we've got and small business and we got a great, we can have startups again. Main Street still employs 75% of the workforce, 75% of the payroll is in small businesses. They're being attacked by this guy and Joe Manchin, for crying out loud. And to help small business, he's saying in Main Street, well, we're going to raise your taxes. We're going to hire 67 or 87,000 IRS agents. And oh, by the way, don't deduct that interest. But we're helping small business. This is the kind of stuff they lie all the time. We got to fix it. We will fix it by getting the House back in November and then moving forward and getting the White House back in 2024.
Byron, let's talk about this. I think it's going to be a massive red wave. I really do. I think it's going to be loud and clear. We're going to win the House. We're going to win back the Senate. But what are Republicans going to do when they're in power? What do you think are the first, let's say, 2 or 3 agenda items that you think they're going to want to accomplish when they regain
look, let me tell you, the first one is we're going to have to deal with border security. And I'm telling you, this is different. I want to lay this out for everybody. You have immigration policy. That's visas,
yes,
pathways into the country. What do you do about asylum procedures? But then you have border security. You cannot have a country when the drug cartels are making $15 billion a year trafficking people and trafficking fentanyl into the United States. So the number one thing we got to do is, and when we start coming up with spending bills that are going to come up under House Republican control, we have to put in there hard and fast that Joe Biden is not allowed to spend money on allowing the cartel to traffic people into the United States. That our border agents have to have the ability to make determinations of credible fear at the border. Now, what does that mean? What that means is the real policy, the traditional policy has been border agents can, when somebody comes up, they can make a determination right then and there. Is this person actually in fear of their life in the country that they come from? And if they make a determination that the answer is no, the border agent can turn around and send them right back. Under Joe Biden, they said, oh no, that has to be an asylum judge, and that the person coming across the country illegally gets an attorney, and that proceeding doesn't even start for 6 or 7 months, and then the second hearing doesn't start for 6 or 7 years. No, we got to stop all that. House Republicans to do that just through the budget. The second thing we have to get to is in energy. And what we have to do is we have to make sure that this administration actually defends the oil leases and the oil permits that they extend. The radical crazies will give the permit, but then they know they got their buddies on the outside who will sue, and they don't defend it in federal court. We have to demand that they defend those permits in federal court, because if we're going to be energy independent, you got to let the people who are out there busting their hump, drilling for oil and drilling for gas, they got to have a fair shot to get those holes dug and get that energy out to service the American people. And then we can actually get back to even doing this cool thing, which is like exporting energy across the globe, so people aren't reliant on Putin or on Xi Jinping. That's what we need to be doing. There's a couple things that we can get done. Oh, and I'm gonna let them clap first. Finish clapping.
Go.
That's good stuff.
Go.
Last one.
Yes.
We're gonna have a lot of investigations, y'all. A lot of investigations are coming. And we, for once and for all, are going to get down to the bottom of so many of the problems that have been caused by congressional Democrats and by this White House. Because the American people need answers, and we have to get down to the solutions that are going to put our country back on track.
So there's a lot of opinions up here, lots of opinions. But Congressman, let me ask you this, because I was quite shocked the other day when Joe Biden kind of almost like said that he handled COVID better than President Trump did. And I was like, well, but President Trump was working on Operation Warp Speed, darling. But he's still like, he goes back to attacking President Trump and demonizing President Trump, and then obviously any America First politician. How is it going to work in a gridlock environment when Republicans are a majority in the House and the Senate, and you've got a Democrat president?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how it works, but I think our charge, Mercedes, is to give him all he can deal with. Let's see how big a boy he is as far as being a veto president or one that wants to move our country forward, because, remember, we get the House, we get the Senate, the people have spoken, right?
Right.
And they want conservative leadership And hopefully he will see that and begin to sit down and make a deal. I'm in the car business, okay? So I'm used to making deals. And I just don't see that he will stand up there alone and just veto everything, because as we've talked about, you know, we've got a lot to fix. We've got to undo a lot of what he's done. And unfortunately, he's driven by what President Trump did. And so much of what, you know, the good things that we're talking on the border. Title 42 is a good thing, right?
Absolutely.
Stay in Mexico policy is a good thing. We need to keep all that. I've got a bill to make it permanent. But just because Trump was for it and Trump created it, he's against it. So it's a great question. And it may require some brinkmanship. It may require some salesmanship. But at the same time, he won't be tested unless we as a House and we as a Senate get back to passing conservative legislation that is for the people, by the people, lower taxes, give the economy back to Main Street, give the economy back to consumers that will allow us all to compete for their business instead of competing against the government. So we got to get that message out there. We got to get that legislation out there, and let's just put it on his desk, right? And let's see what he wants to do.
Byron, you talked about energy independence, the critical importance of this. Obviously, we saw President Biden go off to Saudi Arabia begging for oil. And then you've got the bigger threat. You've got the Russia, China, Iran effect.
Yes.
Which is they know that if we keep America if they can keep America weak, that they're winning. So how can Republicans, as we take on these leadership roles, push back on China, push back on Russia, push back on Iran, especially when you know that what you're dealing with is a weak president that hasn't been able to deal with them?
Well, a couple things. One, we need to lead on ending this foolishness with electric vehicles and solar panels and wind farms. This is foolishness, folks. It does not work. My good buddy Roger is talking about making a deal. Well, what kind of deal is it for us to take our treasure and give it to China in exchange for batteries? That is dumb. That's just dumb stuff.
That is dumb, yeah.
So what we need to do is, America, we need to go back in time a little bit and reinvigorate an energy that we actually taught the world how to create, and that's nuclear power. We need to actually expand our nuclear capabilities in the United States. We need to bring back the mining and enrichment of uranium, and even using thorium and molten salt reactors here in the United States, instead of getting uranium from Russia, which is where most of the world gets their enriched uranium from. We need to do that here at home. If you do that, you start taking care of your Russia problem. If you stop getting all these batteries and solar panels, which, by the way, now we know that the solar panels, when you get rid of them, they actually leach into the groundwater and they contaminate groundwater. Instead of doing that, how about we build our domestic energy capacity here at home so it is cheap, it's reliable. Oh, and by the way, folks, that thing, nuclear power, it's actually greener than solar panels. It's greener than solar energy. It's greener. And it's readily available. We can do that. So that stops us sending money to the Chinese. It stops us having to buy uranium from the Russians. It puts us on the capacity to lead the world when it comes to expanding on nuclear innovation. It's amazing stuff. I've been learning this for the last year and a half. It's great stuff. Oil and natural gas, we should be exporting liquid natural gas to Europe to get Europe off of the teat of Russia.
Okay.
That's what we got to do. We should be exporting that to them. We can do that stuff. Now, how do you get this all to happen? You put pressure, like Roger was saying, on the current president of the United States. This man is terrible at his job. And he's bad. He's terrible at his job, and he is so weak that if House Republicans and Senate Republicans don't seize this moment to put pressure on him and make him make decisions, then we have not done our job.
So, as we're talking about solutions, I think one of the things one of the topics that keeps coming up is Joe Biden mentally fit to be president?
No.
No.
Sorry, I jumped the gun. I apologize.
I don't think any of his cabinet is. But he's not.
I mean, when he's reading off the cue card and he's like, "You should be seated now," it's like, what are they doing? It's really bad staff work. Let me ask you a question on regulations, because as we know, regulations plays a huge role if you're putting these burdensome regulations on the energy industry, on businesses, it creates a huge havoc in investing in these businesses. What do you think is, and bring this also, not only the regulations piece, but the ESG component that these corporations are embracing left and right?
So regulations are killing small business. They're killing all businesses. Here's an interesting statistic. Since Biden has come into office, he's put $200 billion worth of regulations on small business. $200 billion. 130 million hours is required to deal with the $200 billion in regulations. President Trump took all that away. Biden has added that. So if you're a bank or you're a business, you're now all of a sudden finding yourself hiring a compliance officer as opposed to maybe a loan officer that can do business, you see. So the regulations, and people don't think about that, but they literally choke businesses. And they cost jobs because you have to hire people that are not generate income for your business. You have to lay people off, and so it's a real disaster. And they're going to continue to put more and more out there for us. So that's what a challenge is, and it's what they've done. But if you think of $200 billion and 130 million man-hours, that's pretty rough. And can I have 10 seconds?
Yes.
Change gears one second?
Yes.
I want to talk about EV vehicles. Can I say that?
Yes, please.
EV vehicles are a disaster, and they're phony, okay? I'm in the car business. I'm in the car business for 51 years. Nobody comes in and wants an EV vehicle. They don't ask for it. And they have forced these manufacturers to go woke, and they have gone for it. I'm talking about GM. I'm talking about Chrysler. I'm talking about Ford, all the others. And they've bid into this, and they're not sellable. They are not going to be competitive. I've said all along, if you live in Texas, you live right here, and you want to take a jet ski, a boat, or a horse trailer to Midland, Texas, you're never going to get there. And they want the government to put out the charging stations when that ought to be the job of the private sector, like they did with gas stations back in the 20s. And we all know if the government owns the charging stations, they're going to get vandalized and they won't work, okay? So I'm just telling you, I have to touch on this because I'm in the business. EV vehicles are a ripoff. Now, if customers want one, then let us make one, okay? But consumers have to tell us what we want as a dealer. I need to sell what you want, not what the government wants you to have. So I'm pretty passionate about the EV vehicles. Don't fall for it. It's not going to work. If you want one, we should make it, but no government subsidies, because they're going to have to pay me to sell it, and they're going to have to pay the manufacturer to make it, and the taxpayers in the end are going to be footing the bill. It's a disaster.
It's
so
like
you have an opinion.
I know.
He has an opinion on electric vehicles,
It's like
folks.
a perfect TV ad. I can see it now. Byron, you know, we've seen the supply chain crisis, which apparently was supposed to be solved months ago. And then we run into baby formula shortages.
Yes.
With the missteps that the Biden administration knew about it ahead of time and did nothing or not even warn parents about it. I mean, parents are concerned. What is going to be the solution? How do we handle this?
Well, look, I know Pete Buttigieg, when he went on paternity leave, you know, he had some baby formula. I know he might have had his supply. But look, this is a real tragedy. And the reality is that there are serious reforms that have to be done at the FDA. And this administration is not going to do it. When you have a situation where parents can't get baby formula, like I used to buy the baby formula in my house, love you, honey, but I did. I went out and bought it. I know what it is. I have to go find the formula. And you have to keep the same formula. You can't switch.
Yeah.
Because the baby will reject it.
Right.
So when you do this across the country and you don't have a plan in place, you have a situation where children might have lower birth growth rates, lower brain development over the long term. This is a serious tragedy for infants. What you have to do is some serious reforms at the FDA. They cannot shut down plants without a pathway in order to make sure the supply that is needed continues. If we had an administration that thought about supply chains instead of all this woke foolishness, we would have had a plan. As much as they like to say, and Joe Biden said this about 3 years ago, oh, there was no plan, there was no plan. This guy is the guy with no plans. We're moving from crisis to crisis to crisis. It's going to take Republican leadership to make sure we have those. Quick point on ESG. ESG is fascism. That is what this stuff is. It is fascism. When you have knuckleheads in the bureaucracy who've never run a business, who've never really had a real job, and now they get to set the standards for what societal goals are, what energy goals are. They are no better than a Politburo who's going to try to design an economy, and these guys are dummies and don't know even how to work in an economy, let alone how to design an economy. It's fascism. We should never allow it. So we have bills. There are bills in Congress that Republicans are working on to get rid of ESG. We have bills, actually, I have a bill with my colleague French Hill from Arkansas about getting the full employment mandate out of the Federal Reserve and getting the Federal Reserve back to just a stable prices mandate so we don't have these crazy inflations ripping through our country. Those are the solutions that we're working on.
Congressman, what are we going to do about big tech and censorship when Republicans take power?
Well, I think we need to go full speed into it, and we need to make sure voices are heard and not heard. We've seen how they can control the whole media operation, and they say things about one person, don't say things about the other. And we see things happening right now that if it was our side, for example, it would be front page, it would be everywhere. They'd be attacking all of us. So, you know, we've got to get back to where people can say things and get reported properly, and that big tech does not control everything. And they got a good partner, Joe, and really they got a good partner in this administration. And we need to eliminate that partnership and let everybody play on the same playing field.
And Byron, how do we stop critical race theory from being taught in our schools? How do we stop this crazy gender ideology? I mean, this is a big problem that I don't think parents would have ever imagined that they would have to deal with.
No, listen, I know, there's no way in hell my mother would have allowed this to happen. I'm telling you right now, my mother wouldn't have allowed this. Not her. Meredith P. Brown, no way. This never would have happened. The biggest thing is, and this is not just federal, this is federal, state, local.
Yes.
You have to get with your county commissions, your school boards, your state legislatures, and they need to make sure that when they do these diversity, equity, and inclusion seminars that every government office does and a lot of corporate offices are now doing, that they're not being run by these woke nonprofits that subscribe to critical race theory. That's how that stuff has gotten into so many of our institutions. In the military, one of the other key things House Republicans need to make sure gets done is that we are no longer funding this woke ideology in our military.
Amen.
Our military men and women have one job: secure the nation and kill the enemy when it's time to kill the enemy. That is their job, no more, no less. Okay. So that's what we got to do to get it out, of our institutions.
I'm giving you 30 seconds each. My happy warriors, we're solving problems. How are we going to fire Pelosi?
Ooh.
Go, Congress.
How are we going to fire Pelosi? We're going to outvote them in November, right? She's going to be gone, okay? And it can't come soon enough. But let me tell you, this is our generation's Valley Forge. I really believe this. This really is our most important election. We are here on this earth to save this country right now.
Amen.
And we must fight till I had a football coach in college say you fight them on the ice and you fight them till hell freezes over. Let's go, right? But what I'm saying to you is this is important, and we've got to stand up, and we've got to understand this is socialism. Don't be afraid of that word. It's socialism. It's fascism. It's all the above that's attacking this precious freedom and liberty that we have in this country. This country is over 200 years old, as we all know, and look, and it's done really well over those periods of time. And look how hard it is to keep democracy. What's happened the last 18 months, right? It's very precious. We got to fight for it. And yesterday's gone forever. Tomorrow never comes. It's all about the present. Amen. And it's the present because it's a gift from God. This is our gift to stand up. Say, we're not taking it anymore. We love our country. America is the greatest country in the world. Let's keep it that way.
All right, you got to try to beat that.
You got me ready to suit up, Coach. Coach, you got me ready to suit up. Listen, this is very simple. You got to get out and vote, and you better get your family out to vote, and you better get your friends out to vote. We are watching halfway around the globe. The Ukrainian people are staring the Russian military in the face because they want to defend their sovereignty. And they're not worried about it not being fair. They're not worried about how the Russians got more equipment. They're fighting, and they're laying everything on the line to defend their country. If they're willing to do that here in the United States, the least we could do is show up and vote. So let's show up and vote. Let's get rid of Pelosi. Let's take back the House, and let's save America.
Amen.
That's it.